There are nights when the sky forgets mercy, when every drop of rain feels like the earth remembering its sorrows, and every flash of lightning tears open the wounds you tried to hide. That night, I walked beneath a heaven that had lost its patience. The rain was not falling to cleanse, it was falling to remind. And I, Amira, the baker's daughter with nothing left to lose, was the one it came to find. The road home had turned to mud, swallowing my footsteps as if the world itself wanted to keep me from leaving. My shawl clung to my shoulders, soaked and heavy, its threads carrying the scent of smoke from the market fires long gone out. I had sold only 3 loaves of bread that day. 3 loaves, and no hope. The coins in my pocket felt like stones, useless against the sickness waiting for me at home. Thunder grumbled across the hills, rolling like the growl of a beast too ancient to be seen. I tightened my grip on the basket, whispering a prayer to gods who had long forgotten my name. "Just let me reach home," I said, though even the wind laughed at that. The rain grew harsher. It bit into my skin, cold and punishing, turning the village road into a river of despair. The lamps in distant huts flickered faintly, their light breaking through the curtain of storm like lost souls trying to return. That was when I saw him. At first he was only a shape, dark, hunched, motionless. A man sitting on the roadside, head bowed, water running down his face like tears. The storm screamed around him, but he didn't move. Not an inch. My heart stuttered. A memory from my mother's warnings flashed. Never stop for strangers in the storm. Sometimes the rain hides what it wants you to pity. I tried to walk past, but something pulled me back. A quiet tug in my chest that had nothing to do with fear. He looked like a man the world had forgotten, and the world had forgotten too many already. I hesitated, glancing toward the village lights barely visible ahead. Then I turned. The mud sucked at my feet as I stepped closer. "Sir?" I called, my voice trembling under the sound of rain. "Are you all right?" He didn't answer, only lifted his head, slowly, as if waking from 1,000 years of silence. Lightning flared, and for a heartbeat, I saw his face. He was young, but not in the way of innocence. His eyes were dark and distant, like storm clouds holding back everything they'd lost. There was strength there, buried deep, but sorrow too, an exhaustion that made me ache just to see it. "You'll fall sick sitting here," I said, forcing steadiness I didn't feel. "Come. There's a shed up the road." His lips parted, his voice low, hoarse. "No. Leave me." The words hit like thunder, not loud, but final. He sounded like a man used to being obeyed. I should have turned away then. But there was something in the way he said it, like he didn't mean for anyone to care, and I couldn't bear that. I pulled the scarf from around my neck, the one my mother had woven years ago, the last thing that still carried her warmth. My fingers trembled as I held it out. "Take it," I said softly. He looked up, startled. The rain streamed between us like a curtain of glass. "Why?" he asked. "Because you look colder than I am," I said, forcing a small smile. "And it's the only thing I have to give." For a moment, the rain seemed to stop listening to the storm. He stared at the scarf, then at me, his expression unreadable. Slowly, almost reverently, he took it from my hand. His fingers brushed mine, warm despite the cold, and a strange current passed through me, alive, electric, ancient. He wrapped the scarf around his shoulders, his gaze never leaving mine. "You shouldn't be out here," he said quietly. "It's not safe." "I could say the same to you," I whispered back. That almost smile flickered again, brief and fragile. The kind of smile you wear when you've forgotten what it feels like. We sat there for a moment. Me, a poor girl with nothing but pity to give. Him, a stranger who looked like he'd seen kingdoms fall. The rain softened, drumming gently against the earth, and I thought perhaps for the first time in years that the world could still be kind. Then thunder cracked again, this time closer. Down the road, a faint glow appeared, torches moving fast through the rain. I squinted, my heart quickening. Soldiers. The king's crest on their banners glimmered faintly in the lightning's flash. I turned to him. "You need to go. They'll find you here." He didn't move. His eyes flicked toward the lights, then back to me, calm and resigned. "They already have." A chill rippled through me. I followed his gaze to his wrist, and that's when I saw it. Not a bracelet, not jewelry, a silver emblem, shining faintly beneath the torn sleeve of his soaked tunic, an intricate carving of a lion crowned with 3 stars. I froze. That mark wasn't just rare. It was forbidden. Only one bloodline carried it. My breath caught. "That's the royal crest," I whispered. He met my eyes. "Once, perhaps," he said softly. "But not tonight." Lightning split the sky in 2. The storm roared, shaking the earth beneath us, and I stumbled back. The man rose slowly to his feet, the scarf glowing faintly against his chest like a promise the heavens couldn't touch. The torches grew nearer, the soldiers' voices cutting through the rain. My heart pounded as I looked at him, this stranger who was no stranger at all. And in the next flash of light, I saw his face clearly for the first time. The sharp lines, the regal bearing, the quiet fury in his eyes. The man I had pitied was no beggar. He was the blood of the throne, and the storm that had found me hadn't come to wash away my sorrow. It had come to change my fate. Some eyes don't just look, they command, they remember, they wound. His were like that. Eyes that carried the weight of silence, meant for thrones, not streets. Even soaked to the bone, he sat like someone who had forgotten what it meant to kneel. The poor shiver from cold, he shivered from memory. And when he lifted his gaze to mine, the storm itself seemed to pause, as if it too feared interrupting what he was hiding. The rain softened, its fury fading into a steady rhythm, like a heartbeat the sky couldn't forget. We stood beneath the old acacia tree, the world around us trembling in quiet. The stranger adjusted my scarf around his shoulders, the wet fabric clinging to him, heavy, but warm. It was strange, watching a man who looked like he belonged to power dressed in a poor girl's mercy. "You shouldn't have stopped," he said finally, his voice low and careful, each word shaped like a secret. "The storm hides more than rain tonight." I met his gaze, trying to read what the shadows in his face refused to say. "And yet, you sit here as if you're waiting for it to find you." He didn't smile, but something in his eyes flickered, an almost human ache. "Perhaps I am." He turned his head slightly, listening to the rain, and for a long moment we said nothing. Only the storm spoke for us, whispering, remembering, warning. I looked down at the basket in my hands, half filled with bread I hadn't sold. My brother's face flashed in my mind, pale, hungry, waiting, and still my hand moved on its own. I tore one loaf in half and held it toward him. "Eat," I said. He hesitated, studying me like a puzzle. "You should save that for yourself. Then it will feed no one," I replied. He took it slowly, as though the act itself was unfamiliar. When our fingers brushed, a faint warmth passed through my skin. Not fever, not fear, something older. He raised the bread to his lips and ate, chewing in silence, every movement measured. We sat side by side under the tree, sharing quiet more than food. He didn't ask my name. I didn't ask his. But there was something about him that unsettled me, like standing before a story whose ending you were never meant to read. "Where are you from?" I asked finally. He looked out toward the dark hills. "From a place that no longer remembers me." "Then you've been gone long?" "Too long," he said softly. "Long enough to see that mercy costs more than power." The words hung heavy between us, and I wondered what kind of man spoke of mercy as if it were a battle lost. I watched the way he stared at the horizon, not searching for home, but mourning it. Then came the sound that shattered everything. At first it was faint, a dull rhythmic thudding against the mud. Then louder, clearer. Hoofbeats. I froze. He did not. His shoulders straightened, his hand tightening around the scarf. His calm was terrifying, not the stillness of peace, but of someone preparing for war. "Who's there?" I whispered. He didn't answer. His eyes flicked, toward the road, where faint lights danced through the rain, torches moving fast. "Soldiers." He turned to me sharply. "You need to go." "Why?" "Because they're not looking for you." My stomach turned cold. The torches were closer now, the gold of their flame reflecting against the wet air. "Then who—" He stepped closer, his hand catching my wrist. His touch was firm, his breath uneven. "If they see me with you, you'll die too." My words tangled in my throat. "Who are you?" He hesitated. Lightning flashed, and for a heartbeat, I saw it again. The silver emblem on his wrist, the crowned lion gleaming beneath the water, the mark of the royal bloodline. Realization struck like thunder. "That's the king's sigil," I whispered. His expression darkened. "Once, yes, but not anymore." The rain intensified again, washing the mud, the fear, the silence. He released my wrist, his eyes softening, not from weakness, but from regret. "I didn't mean to bring this storm to your path," he said, "but kindness has a way of finding danger." Before I could speak, the hoofbeats erupted closer, men shouting, their torches cutting through the darkness like fire tearing through memory. He turned toward the forest, jaw clenched. "When they ask, you saw nothing." "Wait," I began, stepping after him. He turned back once, eyes burning like the storm had lit them from within. "Run, Amira," he said quietly, "because if they find you beside me, Mercy will die before dawn." The riders burst through the mist, shouting orders, blades gleaming in the torchlight. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering as he vanished into the trees, my scarf fluttering behind him like a torn prayer. The soldiers' torches flared brighter, their voices fierce and desperate. And in that moment, I knew the man I'd tried to save was not fleeing the storm. He was the reason it had come. There are nights when the sky doesn't rain. It bleeds. The storm that chased us through the market wasn't just water from the heavens. It was the sound of destiny clawing at our heels. The air burned with lightning and fear, the kind that tastes like metal on your tongue and makes your breath stumble inside your chest. I could hear his heartbeat beside mine. Quick, desperate, too human for someone born of a crown. Nothing makes a heart louder than the fear of being caught. And that night, both of ours were screaming in the dark. The market was a graveyard of echoes. Wooden stalls collapsed under the weight of rain, broken jars spilling spice-scented mud into the puddles. The lamps had drowned hours ago, leaving only the faint shimmer of lightning to guide our steps. I dragged him behind a cart, the prince who called himself no one, though his eyes had already confessed what his mouth would not. "This way," I hissed, pulling him toward an abandoned stall half swallowed by ivy. Its roof leaned dangerously, but it was the only shadow left deep enough to hide a secret. He followed without question, though every step betrayed the kind of man unused to following anyone. When we ducked beneath the half-broken beam, I could finally see his face, sharp, rain-slick, eyes dark with something more than fear. "Stay down," I whispered, pushing him gently toward the corner. He shook his head. "They'll find me here. You should go." "And let you die?" My voice cracked between thunder. "If I wanted safety, I wouldn't have stopped for you." For a moment we just stared at each other, strangers bound by rain and a choice neither of us understood. Then, in the distance, came the sound that froze the blood in my veins. Hoofbeats, heavy, steady, merciless. The soldiers were close. We crouched lower as they entered the square. Black silhouettes beneath burning torches, steam rising from their armor, rain hissing against their metal. Their voices carried through the storm like knives. "Search everywhere," one shouted. "The traitor cannot leave the city." Another added, "By the king's command, dead or alive." My breath caught. Traitor? My eyes flicked toward him, the stranger I'd just sheltered. His hands were clenched tight, his gaze locked on the mud. "What have you done?" I whispered, my voice trembling. He didn't look at me when he spoke. Something I thought was right. The words were quiet, but they felt like thunder inside my skull. Outside, boots splashed through puddles as soldiers tore through the market. One kicked open a barrel, another flipped a table. The leader, taller than the rest, draped in a soaked crimson cloak, held a torch high and unrolled a rain-soaked scroll. "By royal decree," he roared, "Prince Rafik ibn Idris is charged with treason, plotting against his own brother, the king." My world tilted. I turned toward him, the man shivering beside me, mud on his face, wearing my scarf like a beggar's cloak. A prince, the king's brother. The rain blurred everything, yet his silence told me it was true. A prince had shared my bread. A prince was hiding under my roof of ruin. He met my gaze then, his eyes hollow and burning. "Now you understand why I can't be seen," he murmured. Before I could respond, a soldier's shadow moved close, his boots splashing beside our stall. The torchlight danced against the cracks in the wood, glowing faintly through the gaps. I pressed a trembling finger to my lips. "Don't move." The soldier knelt, scanning the ground. "Fresh footprints here, Captain." The leader turned sharply. "Search that stall." My heart leapt into my throat. The prince's eyes widened. He grabbed my wrist, his grip strong, commanding yet gentle, his whisper cutting through the chaos. "If they see me," he said, voice raw and low, "you'll die too." Before I could breathe, thunder cracked above us, loud enough to shake the ground. The soldier flinched, his torch falling into the puddle, the flame dying instantly. In that flash of confusion, I moved. "Over there," I shouted, pointing toward the far end of the market. "I saw someone run that way." The captain spun, eyes narrowing. "After him." The soldiers rushed toward the alley, splashing mud, shouting orders. The market filled with noise again, boots, rain, the storm's angry voice. But in our corner, silence bloomed. I turned back to him. His chest heaved. His hair clung to his forehead. "You shouldn't have done that," he said softly. "Neither should you," I replied. The tension between us hung heavy, alive. I could see his thoughts in his eyes, regret, pride, and something that looked too much like gratitude. "We can't stay here," I whispered. "There's a way out beyond the tannery wall. If we move when they turn back, we can make it." He hesitated. "You'd risk your life for me?" "For anyone who's cold in the rain," I said. "That's all I saw when I stopped for you." For a second, something like a smile flickered across his lips, a moment of warmth in the storm. Then, silently, he nodded. We waited until the soldiers' torches vanished behind the street bend. Then we ran. Through puddles, through broken stalls, through the pounding storm that refused to let go. But fate listens, even when you whisper. A soldier's shout ripped through the night like a blade. "Captain, over here." We froze. He stood at the edge of the market, holding something above his head, soaked, muddy, familiar. My scarf, the one I'd wrapped around the prince. Its edge gleamed faintly in the torchlight, embroidered with the royal crest. Some rains wash away dirt, others reveal what the earth tried to bury. That night, the storm felt alive, whispering names I wasn't meant to hear, peeling back truth drop by drop until even lies had nowhere left to hide. His face stayed half hidden beneath the downpour, but his silence carried a story older than the thunder that chased us. I didn't yet know who he was, only that his eyes had stopped running long before his feet did. We moved through the alleys like ghosts too tired to haunt. The rain flooded the stones beneath us, each puddle catching brief flashes of lightning, reflections of a world that didn't belong to either of us anymore. Behind us, The soldiers' voices carried through the wind, hard, disciplined, hungry. "Faster," he said. His tone clipped, controlled, the voice of someone used to giving orders. It didn't match his torn clothes or the mud on his face. Every word made me question who I had chosen to save. I caught his wrist as we turned a corner, pulling him beneath an archway. "Enough running," I said, chest heaving. "You owe me the truth now." For a moment, he said nothing. The rain poured between us like a wall, yet something in his expression softened. A man too tired to keep lying. He looked at me the way one looks at light before confession. "My name," he said quietly, "is Cale." The name hit something deep, something I didn't want to understand. "Cale," I repeated. "You said you were a wanderer." He exhaled slowly. "I said I had nowhere to belong. Both were true once, until my brother made sure even exile had no mercy." "Your brother." He lifted his left wrist. The silver emblem I had glimpsed before caught a flash of lightning. A crowned lion wrapped in flame. "I am Cale of Idrisia," he said, his voice trembling between defiance and grief. "The king's brother." The words shattered the rain around us. The air grew heavier, colder, as if the storm itself bowed to the weight of his truth. "The king's brother is dead," I whispered. "They said he betrayed the crown." "I didn't betray him," Cale replied, his eyes fierce. "I betrayed his cruelty. He wages war on the poor, on people like you, while the palace drinks gold and calls it peace." I stood against him. For that, I became a ghost the throne needed to kill. His confession burned through the noise. I wanted to step back, to call him liar, traitor, but his face didn't know how to lie. The rain made him look human again, stripped of every royal mask. "Why tell me?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Because you gave what no crown could buy," he said softly. "Mercy. And mercy deserves the truth." Lightning flashed again, revealing the tremor in his hands. He wasn't just running from soldiers. He was running from what power had turned him into. For a moment, I saw the man beneath the title, and it broke something inside me. "I don't know if I can trust you," I whispered. "Then trust the rain," he said. "It's never lied. It only falls where it must." The distant sound of hooves interrupted the fragile stillness. The soldiers were closing in. We turned toward the riverbanks, where mist rose like breath from the earth. The bridge loomed ahead, a trembling skeleton of wood and rope stretched across the raging current. Freedom waited on the other side. Or, so we hoped. Cale squeezed my hand. "Once we cross, the forest will hide us. No one can follow there." "Then let's go," I said. We ran. The rain lashed harder, the boards slick beneath our feet. Each step was a prayer. Each heartbeat is a bargain. Behind us, the torches reappeared, a line of fire slicing through the storm. We were halfway across when I heard it, a sharp, piercing whistle slicing through the rain. Kyle's head snapped toward the sound. His eyes widened. "Get down!" A streak of fire cut through the air, hissing as it flew. The arrow hit the bridge's center beam. In an instant, flame bloomed, wild, roaring, alive. The heat struck my face. The smoke clawed at my lungs. The ropes cracked, screaming under the fire's hunger. The bridge swayed violently. Cale grabbed my shoulders, forcing me back from the edge. "We can still make it." "The bridge is burning," I shouted over the roar. His expression hardened. "So are we, if we stay." Another arrow soared, striking the planks just behind us. Sparks exploded upward, devouring what little path remained. Kyle's grip tightened as the flames painted his face in gold and despair. The soldiers' voices echoed through the storm, their torches drawing closer. Between the fire ahead and the blades behind, there was nowhere left to run, except into the heart of the burning bridge itself. Fire and rain are not meant to meet, yet that night they did, and the world paid attention. The flames devoured the bridge like a beast unchained, the rain hissing in protest as it tried and failed to drown the inferno. The air smelled of smoke, salt, and endings. Between one heartbeat and the next, Kyle's hand gripped mine with desperate certainty, and we jumped, not to escape the fire, but because staying would have meant surrendering to it. The world turned upside down. Wind howled in my ears as the heat vanished, replaced by the brutal slap of icy water. The river swallowed us whole, its current twisting like a living serpent, dragging us through darkness that roared louder than thunder. I tried to scream, but water filled my mouth, my lungs, my world. The surface vanished above me, the weight of the current pressing me downward. Panic clawed through my chest. My arms thrashed uselessly against the flood. I thought of my mother's voice, my brother's laughter, the taste of bread we could no longer afford. I thought of all the things I hadn't done, and the stranger I had chosen to save. Then, through the chaos, something touched my arm. Strong, warm, unrelenting. Kale. His grip cut through the river's rage, pulling me upward through the churning dark. I surfaced with a gasp that tore the silence apart, coughing, choking, half drowned, but alive. "Hold on to me," he shouted through the storm. I clung to his arm, the river hammering against us both. We fought the current together, our limbs burning, our breath fading. It was not the strength of our bodies that kept us afloat. It was the stubborn will of two people the world had already tried to bury. At last, our feet found the riverbed. We stumbled onto the opposite shore, collapsing onto the mud like creatures reborn. The earth was slick and cold, the rain still relentless, but the air finally felt like mercy. I rolled onto my side, coughing water until I could breathe again. My body shook, my heart felt too loud, and my eyes stung from smoke and tears. Kyle knelt beside me, soaked to the bone, his chest rising and falling in heavy, uneven breaths. "You almost didn't make it," he said, voice rough but soft at the edges. "Neither did you," I rasped, shivering. He smiled faintly, that strange, half-broken smile that didn't belong to a prince or a fugitive, but to a man who had seen too much, and still refused to give up. He tore a strip of cloth from his tunic and handed it to me. "For the cut on your arm." I hadn't noticed the blood until then. The sting was sharp when I pressed the cloth against it. "You saved me," I whispered. He looked away, his eyes fixed on the flames dying across the river. "You were the only one who didn't look at me like a curse," he said. "Saving you was the only thing that still made sense." His words lingered between us, quiet and heavy. For the first time, the silence didn't feel like danger. It felt like something fragile, something human. The rain eased into mist, softening the sharp edges of the world. Kyle's gaze shifted toward the forest ahead, dark and endless beneath the mountain's shadow. "We can't stay here," he said. "Once dawn comes, the river will carry our trail. The soldiers will follow the banks." "Where will we go?" I asked. He hesitated, then answered. "There's a man in the forest hills, an old ally. If he still remembers his oath, he'll help us disappear." "You trust him?" Kyle's jaw tightened. "I don't have the luxury of trust, only hope." We stood slowly, our clothes heavy with river water, our breaths clouding the cold air. He tore what was left of his cloak in half and wrapped it around my shoulders. The fabric was soaked, but the gesture burned warmer than fire. "Thank you," I said quietly. He nodded once, his expression unreadable, yet his eyes lingered longer than they should have. In their reflection, I saw not a prince or a hunted man, but a heart trying to remember what kindness felt like. We began to walk, our steps slow and uncertain. The river murmured behind us, the forest waiting ahead, vast, watching, alive. Every rustle felt like breath, every branch like a whisper. Then, somewhere in the distance, a twig snapped. Kyle stopped instantly. His hand went to the dagger at his belt, the shift in his stance swift and practiced. My own heartbeat stumbled. "Someone's here," I murmured. The rain had turned to mist, blurring shapes between the trees. The shadows moved, deliberate, unhurried, familiar with the dark. Kyle stepped forward, his voice steady but low. "Show yourself." Silence. Then, movement. A figure emerged from the gloom. Tall, cloaked, the edge of a blade catching what little moonlight filtered through the clouds. He walked as though the forest itself had cleared a path for him. When he stopped, the air grew colder. The stranger's gaze fixed on Kyle, sharp enough to wound. The man raised his sword slightly, his tone cutting through the mist like the echo of thunder. "You shouldn't have come, my prince." Kyle's breath caught, recognition and regret flashing across his face. The stranger's blade glinted wet under the faint moonlight. And in that moment, the forest, the same one promising refuge, turned into a place that remembered every betrayal ever made. Rain can wash away footprints, but never the promises made beneath it. That night, the forest breathed around us like a living witness, its scent of earth and thunder weaving through the air as though the heavens themselves were listening. Every drop that touched my skin felt like a whisper, a reminder that trust, once broken by kings and fate alike, could still find a place to bloom among the fallen. We stumbled into the woods, drenched and shivering, the echo of the burning bridge still haunting the night behind us. The rain had turned colder now, slicing through the air like truth after a lie. Kyle's steps were uneven, his hand pressed against the wound at his side. I reached to steady him, and he didn't pull away this time, maybe because fear had burned too much energy for pride. From between the trees, a voice broke the quiet, deep, steady, and cold enough to stop our breath. "You shouldn't have come this way, Kale." The man stepped into view, the firelight from his torch flickering across a face marked by scars and years of loyalty turned to exile. Kyle froze. The name left his lips like a prayer half remembered. Tariq. Once this man had been his shadow, sworn to die for him. Now he looked like the kind of ghost that survives only to haunt. "You're supposed to be dead," Kale said, voice rough with disbelief. Tariq smirked faintly. "Death and I made a deal. I told him I'd come back when I finished what the living refused to do." His eyes moved past Kyle, to me. His expression hardened. "Who's the girl?" Kyle's tone was calm, protective. "She's the reason I'm not ashes at the bottom of that river." Tariq's eyes flickered toward me again, sharp, assessing. "Then she's trouble." "She saved my life," Kyle said quietly. "That's not trouble. That's grace." Something in Tariq's gaze softened, for a heartbeat, before the storm outside swallowed the silence again. He motioned us forward. "Come. The rain carries more than water tonight. The forest listens." We followed him through the dark. The ground was slick, the air thick with the scent of wet bark and smoke. Each tree leaned closer, as if curious to hear the secrets we carried. The storm's rhythm seemed slower here, almost respectful, as though we had stepped into a place that remembered vows. When we reached a small clearing, Tariq led us into a cave hidden behind a curtain of ivy. The walls glimmered faintly, wet stone reflecting the glow of his torch. Kyle sank down heavily, his face pale. Without a word, I tore a strip from my dress and pressed it to his wound. "You'll bleed out before sunrise if you don't rest," I murmured. Tariq's gaze lingered on my hands, then on the scarf around my shoulders. The moment the embroidery caught the light, his expression changed, not in fear, but reverence. He stepped closer, voice low. "Where did you get that?" I hesitated. "It was given to me when I was a child, by a woman near the river." He reached out, fingers trembling slightly as he touched the edge of the cloth. The threads shimmered faintly, gold intertwined with crimson. "I've seen this before," he whispered. "It belonged to her, to the queen." Kale's head snapped up. "That's impossible. My mother's belongings were burned after her death." Tariq shook his head. "Not this. This scarf was sacred, woven with her own crest. The rain would not burn it. The forest would not take it. It was said that whoever carried it would one day bring the truth back to the throne. I stared at the scarf in disbelief. "It's just fabric," I whispered. But even as I said it, the threads shimmered again, catching the flicker of the firelight as if alive. Kyle looked at me differently now, not as a stranger who had shared her bread, but as someone fate had wrapped into his bloodline. "Tell me the woman's name," he said. "I never knew it," I replied. "But when she left me, the storm stopped, just like tonight." Silence filled the cave, heavy, almost holy. Tariq's torch hissed softly, the flame bending with the wind. "Then it's true," he murmured. "The forest remembers its promises." Kyle frowned. "What are you talking about?" Tariq's eyes met his, grave and burning. "There's an old prophecy your father buried with her. It spoke of two heirs, one of power, one of mercy, and a stranger who would bind their fates when blood washed through rain." The storm outside grew louder, thunder rolling across the sky like drums of warning. My hands trembled as I clutched the scarf tighter. "And what does it mean?" I whispered. Tariq exhaled slowly. "It means the Queen's spirit chose her replacement the night she died. And if that prophecy still breathes—" He looked at Kyle, then at me, his voice a whisper swallowed by thunder. "Then she's not just your savior, my prince. She's the one who carries the Queen's mark, the key to reclaiming the kingdom, or destroying it." The fire whispered against the cave walls, as if it too feared what would be spoken next. The rain had died hours ago, leaving behind a silence so thick it felt alive. Listening. Waiting. I sat close to the flames, my scarf heavy on my shoulders, its damp threads glinting like veins of gold. I had never believed in destiny, but as Tariq's eyes found mine through the shadows, I realized belief was no longer a choice. Some truths don't wait for faith. They demand surrender. Tariq's voice carried the weight of years that no soldier should remember. "Do you know what that cloth around your shoulders means, girl?" he asked softly. "It isn't just fabric. It's a prophecy stitched in silk." Kyle turned toward him, confusion mixing with dread. "You're talking about my mother's legend." "The Queen's last vow," Tariq replied. "Before she died, she said, 'When mercy meets royalty in a storm, the kingdom will remember its heart.' That storm you walked through wasn't a chance. It was the crown calling mercy home." His words pressed against me like the air before thunder. My pulse quickened. "You can't mean me," I said. "I sell bread in the market. I don't belong in stories." Tariq studied me, not kindly, not cruelly, but like a man watching fate take human shape. "And yet you carry her mark, child. That scarf was hers. The Queen's blood stitched it with mercy so the forest would remember." Kyle's eyes darkened, the fire reflecting in them like fractured glass. "My mother. She said something once, before the guards took her. She whispered, 'Mercy will return the crown.' I thought it was just comfort." Tariq's voice dropped lower. "It was a warning." The flame crackled, shrinking smaller, as if the air itself bent to listen. Outside, the last drop of rain slid from the roof of the cave and fell into the mud. One soft sound that marked the moment the storm ended. And then, silence. Not peace. Silence. Heavy, deliberate, watchful. Kyle looked up. Why did the forest stop breathing? Tariq glanced toward the cave's mouth, unease tightening his jaw. Because prophecy has memory. When the words are spoken aloud, the old gods start listening. I clutched the scarf tighter. Its warmth was gone. It felt cold now, almost pulsing. "What does it want from me?" "The same thing it wanted from her," Tariq said quietly. "To choose between mercy and power." I stared at him, my chest tight with disbelief. "I don't even understand what that means." "You will," he said simply. "At dawn." Kale stood, brushing dirt from his hands. His expression was unreadable, exhaustion, fear, and something like hope warring behind his eyes. Then we move when the light comes, toward the capital, toward the truth. Tariq nodded but didn't rise. He stared into the flame like a man seeing ghosts. The king's eyes are everywhere. If we're caught, Mercy will die again, this time with no one left to speak her name. I lay awake long after they slept, the fire dimming into embers. My mind replayed his words, that single sentence looping like a heartbeat. When mercy meets royalty and storm. The scarf glowed faintly, threads alive with breath. I touched it gently, whispering, "If you truly belonged to her, tell me why you chose me." No answer came, only the sound of wind stirring the leaves outside. When sleep finally claimed me, it was shallow and restless. I dreamed of water and fire, of a crown floating downstream, of a woman's voice saying, "The kingdom's heart beats where kindness bleeds." I woke before sunrise. The cave was colder, the fire dead. Kyle still slept, one arm curled protectively around his sword. I turned toward the entrance to call Tariq, but his place was empty. At first I thought he had gone to scout ahead, but then I saw it, near the mouth of the cave, lying half buried in mud, his sword, the blade slick with blood, fresh and dark, the handle glinting faintly in the pale dawn. I rushed forward, calling his name, but only the forest answered, whispering in a tongue I couldn't understand. Kyle woke at my cry and followed my gaze. His face went pale. The forest had gone still again, the same stillness that came before lightning struck. I knelt by the sword, the blood still warm against my hands. The scarf around my neck pulsed once, faint, like a heartbeat. Tariq's warning echoed through the silence. The king's eyes are everywhere. And as the sun broke through the trees, painting the world gold, I knew one thing with terrifying certainty. The storm had only changed its shape. They say loyalty is forged in battle, but I learned it bleeds out in silence. The morning after Tariq's disappearance, the forest felt hollow, its mist curling around us like unanswered prayers. The air smelled of wet leaves and regret, and every step we took seemed to echo a question neither of us wanted to speak aloud. Trust, once cracked, doesn't shatter in a moment. It erodes gently, with every breath that sounds too quiet. And that morning, even the rain was holding its breath. Kyle walked ahead of me, his cloak torn, his shoulders rigid beneath the dripping branches. I followed the trail of mud and broken twigs he left behind, pretending not to notice that he no longer looked back to see if I was keeping up. His silence was colder than the wind. We found the tracks just after sunrise, one set deep and heavy, another smaller, hurried, leading back toward the palace road. Kyle crouched beside them, brushing the mud from a faint imprint. "He wasn't taken," he said finally, voice low, bitter. "He walked away." My heart clenched. "He could have been forced." Kyle cut me off with a sharp look. "No. Look at the stride. It's steady, confident. He met someone, Amira. He planned it." The words tasted like ash. I wanted to argue, to defend Tariq's memory, but the truth was already written in the soil. Betrayal doesn't need proof when your heart already knows it's true. We followed the path to the edge of the old marketplace, a graveyard of stalls and stone, half swallowed by vines. The air was still thick with the smoke of distant fires. It felt like walking through a memory that no longer wanted to be remembered. Kyle stopped suddenly, his hand on his sword. "We're not alone." Before I could speak, the first arrow struck the ground beside me. The second sliced through my sleeve. "Down!" Kyle shouted, pulling me behind a crumbling wall. The air filled with the hiss of arrows, the thud of boots, the metallic rhythm of soldiers closing in. Their voices carried over the storm's echo. "The king wants them alive." Kyle's eyes burned. "He sold us out," he said, more to himself than me. "Tariq told them where we'd run." Another arrow whistled past. Kyle drew his blade, the steel catching faint sunlight. "When I move, you run," he said. "No." I gripped his arm. "You won't survive that." His gaze softened just enough for a heartbeat. "I wasn't meant to survive this, Amira. You were." Before I could stop him, he stepped into the open. The clash was immediate. Steel against steel, sparks scattering like stars dying too soon. I watched from the shadows, every heartbeat a scream I couldn't release. He fought like the storm itself, all fury and sorrow, but numbers have no mercy. When the soldiers surrounded him, I knew what I had to do. I grabbed a fallen torch and hurled it into a puddle of oil spilled from a broken cart. Fire erupted, racing across the ground, splitting the chaos in two. "Kyle, go!" I shouted, smoke stinging my eyes. He hesitated, then vanished through the flames, swallowed by the rising haze. The soldiers turned on me, blades drawn, faces hidden behind the king's crest. One struck me hard across the back. I fell to the ground, the mud cold against my cheek. Hands grabbed me, iron tight, dragging me up. My body ached, but my voice didn't shake when I said, "You think cages can hold mercy?" The soldier's hand hit my face, sharp and final. "The king will decide what mercy means." They bound my wrists and dragged me through the ruins, through streets I once walked freely. The city loomed ahead, towering walls that glittered with cruelty. Every step toward it felt like a step away from the girl I had been. The palace gates opened with a moan that sounded too human. The courtyard beyond gleamed like gold beneath a sky that should have stayed gray. I stumbled forward, the soldiers pushing me until I fell to my knees on marble so polished it reflected the clouds. And then I saw him. The king descended the stairs slowly, his robes flowing like shadows stitched with silver. His crown was smaller than I imagined, and somehow that made it more terrifying. His eyes were calm, sharp, the color of storms that never end. He stopped before me, close enough that I could see the reflection of my own trembling face in his armor. He reached out, fingers cold as rain, tilting my chin upward. "So," he said softly, almost amused, "this is the girl who warmed my brother's heart." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Let's see if it still beats when I'm done. They say dungeons are built to hold criminals, but I learned that night they also hold mercy hostage." The air below the palace was thick with the weight of forgotten prayers, heavy with the ghosts of those who once begged for freedom and received silence instead. Chains clinked like distant rain, echoing through stone that reeked of rust and old despair. I sat there, knees drawn to my chest, soaked and shivering, wondering how kindness could lead a person here. My hands still carried the scent of the scarf I had given in the storm, and for the first time, I hated the memory of that mercy. The guard's footsteps drew closer, steady and cruel, like the ticking of fate. A torch flickered against the wall, casting long shadows through the iron bars. When the door opened, the flame revealed not another soldier, but the king himself. He stood tall and calm, his cloak dragging through the puddles, his crown gleaming faintly beneath the dying firelight. His eyes, cold and ancient, studied me as one studies a strange insect, with curiosity, not compassion. "So," he said, his voice slow, smooth, almost kind, "this is the girl who thought she could warm a traitor." My heart stuttered, but I didn't look away. "He wasn't a traitor," I whispered. "He was just cold." The king's smile was sharp, cruel in its patience. "And now you'll freeze beside him." He took a step closer. "Do you know who that man truly is?" Before I could answer, a voice echoed from the next cell, rough, tired, but unbroken. "Enough. Kyle." The king turned toward the sound, his expression shifting to something darker, colder. "My brother," he said quietly, almost to himself, still clinging to charity even while chained. Kyle stepped forward, his wrists bound, face bruised but steady. "You call it charity," he said, "but it's what your throne forgot. Mercy." The king's laugh echoed through the chamber. "Mercy doesn't rule kingdoms, Kale. It ruins them. It makes weak men believe they can challenge power." He moved closer, voice lowering to a venomous whisper. "Even your mother's mercy couldn't save her when she defied me." I saw Kale's jaw tighten. He didn't speak, but the silence between them burned hotter than words. The king turned away, his cloak dragging like a black tide behind him. "At dawn," he said softly, "you will both learn what mercy costs." When he left, the torchlight dimmed, leaving us in half-darkness. I pressed my hands against the cold stone that separated our cells. "Kale." He turned his head, voice trembling but steady. "Are you hurt?" "No," I said, though my heart was breaking. "Just scared." He smiled faintly, a tired, hopeless kind of smile. "Then you still have something the king can't kill." We sat in silence. The rain outside had slowed to a steady murmur, soft, sorrowful, almost like it pitied us. The hours crawled past, the sound of dripping water marking time we didn't have. Finally, Kyle spoke again. "Do you regret it?" "Regret what?" "Giving me your scarf." I hesitated. "No, because if I hadn't, I wouldn't have learned what mercy really costs." He laughed softly, and for a heartbeat, the dungeon didn't feel like a grave. Then maybe mercy still has a chance. I closed my eyes, letting the warmth of his words hold me where chains could not. I thought of my mother's laughter, of the rain that had once felt like hope, of the fire that nearly drowned us both, and I knew I would choose kindness again, even if it killed me. A sudden creak startled me. Footsteps approached, slower this time, uncertain. The guard. His face was hidden in shadow, his hands trembling as he stopped outside my cell. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, quietly, he slipped something through the bars. A key. I froze. "Why?" I whispered. His eyes darted toward the corridor. "Because she once spared me," he said. "She." "The queen," he murmured. "Your scarf. It was hers once. She saved my mother when the king would have burned us all. She said mercy doesn't die. It waits." He swallowed hard. "Tonight, it waits for you." Before I could speak, he turned and vanished into the dark. I stared at the key in my trembling hands, the metal colder than my skin, heavier than my fear. On the other side of the wall, Kyle's voice broke the silence. Calm, almost reverent. "Amira, mercy gave us chains once. Maybe now it gives us a choice." And as thunder rolled faintly above the earth, I realized, sometimes mercy isn't what frees you. It's what dares you to act. They said storms were the gods' tears, that when the sky broke open, it was heaven mourning the sins of men. But that night, as thunder clawed across the horizon and lightning bled through the clouds, I knew the rain wasn't falling for grief. It was falling for reckoning. Every drop that hit the palace roof carried the sound of my heartbeat, wild and defiant. The world outside was chaos, and within it, I had chosen to stop waiting for miracles. I was done being mercy in chains. That night, the rain didn't just return. It came for judgment. The key trembled in my shaking hand, slick with sweat and rainwater that seeped through the cracks of the dungeon ceiling. My pulse roared louder than the storm as I slid it into the lock. The moment it turned, the sound echoed like thunder beneath the earth. I froze, breath shallow, until the world stayed still. Then, slowly, I pushed the gate open. Freedom greeted me not with warmth, but with the cold bite of fear. The air in the dungeon smelled of rot, iron, and despair. Water dripped from the ceiling like a slow clock counting the seconds left of our lives. I crept forward, bare feet brushing the damp stone, the hem of my torn dress heavy with mud. When I reached Kyle's cell, he was kneeling against the wall, his head bowed, his wrists bruised by chains. For a moment, I simply watched him. The man who had lost a crown to protect strangers, whose mercy had become a curse. "Kale," I whispered. His head lifted. Even in the darkness, his eyes caught what little light there was. Weary, yet unbroken. "Amira." "The rain's here," I said softly. "It's time." He stared at the key in my hand, disbelief flickering across his face before it melted into something like awe. "You're risking everything." "I already did the moment I shared my scarf," I whispered, sliding the key into the lock. It clicked, once, sharp and final, and the chains fell. For a heartbeat, silence ruled, and then, faintly, the sound of distant bells rang through the halls. We ran. The torches along the corridor flickered, struggling against the cold breath of the storm leaking through the cracks. The wind wailed through the walls as though the palace itself wanted to scream. When we burst into the courtyard, the storm met us in full, wind whipping, lightning tearing across the sky. The rain came down in silver torrents, blurring every face, every sound, every fear. "Through the garden!" Kale shouted over the thunder. His hand found mine, firm, protective, pulling me toward the carved archway that led to the royal grounds. The marble beneath us had turned to glass, slick and treacherous. We stumbled, slipped, but never stopped. The guards were already shouting. Arrows sliced the rain like black streaks of death. One struck the pillar beside me, shattering into splinters. Kyle pulled me behind a fallen statue, his breathing heavy, but his grip steady. "We can reach the throne hall," he said. "End this tonight." I looked at him, drenched, trembling, eyes blazing through the storm. "And what? A war, a crown, or the curse you were born into?" He held my gaze, voice breaking with truth. "All of it." We ran again, through the broken gardens, past burning braziers drowned by rain, past the statues of kings long dead. The great doors of the throne room loomed ahead, their gold carvings streaked with black smoke. Kyle shoved them open with both hands, and we stepped inside. The king stood waiting, tall, rigid, a shadow carved from pride. His crown gleamed dully under the flickering light, his sword already drawn. Behind him the banners dripped rainwater, their colors darkened to blood. "So," the king said, his voice cold and sharp as steel, "the traitor prince brings his peasant to die beside him." Kyle stepped forward. "You've turned the kingdom into your reflection, all gold on the outside, all rot within. That ends tonight." The king laughed, low and cruel. "You speak of mercy like it's a virtue, but mercy breeds rebellion." He turned toward me. "And you, girl, what are you to my brother? Savior? Temptation? Or just another fool who believes in kindness?" I trembled but met his gaze. "Kindness doesn't need your belief, Your Majesty. It survives where power dies." For the first time, silence cracked the hall louder than thunder. The king's expression hardened. "Then mercy will die with you." He raised his sword. Kyle stepped forward, but I moved faster, standing between them, rain dripping from my hair, my heart louder than the storm. "If mercy must die," I said, voice trembling, "then let it die reminding you what it looks like." The king swung. The world flashed, white. Lightning screamed through the roof, shattering marble, splitting heaven from stone. The sword never reached me. It vanished in light. When my eyes opened, the throne was burning. The crown cracked in half, and through the smoke, Kyle's voice broke. "Amira!" But I couldn't answer, because the rain was no longer falling around me. It was falling through me, as if the storm itself had chosen its queen. They say thunder speaks in the language of kings, but that night, it spoke in mine. The sky did not roar for power, it roared for mercy, for every unheard prayer buried beneath the stones of the fallen. The lightning that tore the heavens apart did not come to destroy. It came to choose. It came to remind the world that kindness, when wounded long enough, can rise wearing armor made of light. And as that light poured through the roof, striking the throne that had ruled through fear, I knew the storm had not been sent by gods. It had been born of mercy itself. When the light faded, silence ruled the kingdom. The marble floor that once shone with pride now glistened with rain and blood, the fire that had devoured the hall dying beneath the mercy of the storm. The crown, split in two, rolled from the dais like a fallen judgment. Smoke curled through the air, carrying the scent of iron, rain, and redemption. I rose slowly, my body trembling but unbroken. Around me, the guards who had moments ago been sworn to kill now stood frozen, their swords lowered, eyes wide with awe and confusion. They looked at me, not with hatred, but with something older, deeper. Recognition. Kyle stumbled toward me through the wreckage, his face streaked with ash and tears. "Amira," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Are you—" "I'm alive," I breathed, though the truth felt too large for words. But everything else has changed. He looked around the hall, where soldiers had begun to kneel one by one. No order was given, no command spoken. They simply fell to their knees, as though the storm had pressed its will into their bones. The thunder faded into a low hum, like the earth itself sighing in relief. Kyle straightened, his once torn cloak clinging to his shoulders in the rain. He turned toward the shattered throne where his brother's crown lay in ruin. "No more blood," he said quietly. "This kingdom has bled enough." The captain of the guard, wounded and pale, limped forward. His armor was dented, his pride broken. "My prince," he said hoarsely, "the king is gone. What should we do now?" Kyle glanced at me. His voice, when it came, carried both strength and sorrow. "Lay down your weapons," he said. "The throne belongs not to a man, but to what saves one." The soldiers exchanged glances, unsure, but Kyle's calm defied their doubt. "Forgive them," I whispered to him. "They're lost, not evil." He nodded. "No one dies tonight." The men bowed their heads, their torches dimmed under the rain as if the fire itself had grown ashamed of its heat. Outside, lightning still flared, but it no longer threatened. It illuminated. Kyle turned back to me, his expression shifting from duty to reverence. From the folds of his robe, he drew a small silver pendant, tarnished by years, yet still gleaming faintly through the stormlight. It was shaped like a teardrop, carved with the symbol of the crown's first queen. "This belonged to my mother," he said softly, holding it between his fingers as if it were made of memory. "The day she died, she said mercy would return to claim her kingdom. I never understood what she meant. Until you." I shook my head, rain streaming down my face. "I'm no queen, Kale. I was just trying to help a stranger in the rain." He smiled, weary, tender, and endless. "And that's what makes you one." Then, before I could stop him, Kyle dropped to one knee. The sound of it, a prince kneeling not before power, but before mercy, filled the hall louder than thunder. Gasps rippled through the guards. The storm seemed to hush. Kyle lifted the pendant and clasped it gently around my neck. The silver was cold at first, then warm, pulsing faintly, as though it carried a heartbeat of its own. He looked up at me, his voice clear and solemn. "From this day, the kingdom will remember you not as a savior, not as a peasant, but as the girl who shared her scarf with destiny." For a long moment, no one moved. Then, as if guided by the wind itself, every soldier bowed. The servants in the hall fell to their knees, their faces lifted toward the open sky. The rain that poured through the broken ceiling changed its sound, no longer harsh, but soft, almost melodic, like a lullaby for a world reborn. It ran down the walls, over the shattered marble, cleansing everything it touched. Kyle rose beside me, his hand brushing mine. "This kingdom is yours now, too," he said quietly. "Yours, because you remembered what we forgot." I didn't answer. I couldn't. I only looked up at the sky that had torn itself open to let mercy through. The storm had ended, but its echo remained in my chest, steady, alive. As the clouds parted, sunlight spilled into the ruins like gold poured from heaven. The broken crown caught the light. Two halves joined by a single drop of water sliding between them, glimmering like a tear. I reached out, and for the first time, the kingdom didn't bow to a crown. It bowed to compassion. The storm had ended, but its story had only just begun. They used to say that power changes hearts. But when the crown touched my head, I realized power only reveals what was always hidden beneath the skin. The night I became queen, rain poured from a sky heavy with memory, as if the heavens themselves had remembered the girl who once shared her only scarf with a stranger beneath a storm. That rain didn't bless me. It reminded me that mercy had made me queen long before the throne ever did. And as thunder rolled across the valley, I understood the truth no kingdom had ever spoken aloud, that the strongest rule is the one that kneels before kindness. Years passed, but I never forgot the sound of that rain, the sound of change being born. Under my rule, the palace no longer glittered with gold, but breathed with life. Its marble halls echoed not with commands, but with laughter. Kyle rebuilt the kingdom not with iron, but with understanding, and beside him, I rewrote every law that had once crushed the poor. Where soldiers once guarded walls, now children planted trees. Where fear once silenced prayers, now songs rose in gratitude to the rain. I walked among my people, not as a queen above them, but as a voice among hearts that had learned to trust again. Mothers would touch my hand and whisper blessings, calling me the queen of the rain, but I would only smile and tell them it was mercy that ruled long before I did. In the grand hall hung a single relic, my old torn scarf. Framed in crystal and moonlight, it looked ordinary to the eyes, yet sacred to the soul. Kyle placed it there on our first coronation night and said, "Let every ruler who comes after us remember, crowns fade, but kindness survives." And every time I looked at it, I saw not fabric, but fate. Outside, the monsoon returned, not fierce, not punishing, but gentle, steady, almost affectionate. The scent of wet earth filled the palace, and the wind carried laughter from the courtyard, where the children played barefoot in puddles. It reminded me of who I had been, the hungry girl walking through a storm with bread in one hand and courage in the other. Kyle joined me by the window, his robe soaked from the rain, his crown forgotten on the table behind him. "You're still listening to it," he said, smiling softly. I looked up at the sky, the silver sheets of rain painting the world alive again. "Because it listens back," I replied. He laughed, that warm, quiet sound that still made me feel like the storm had meaning. "Do you ever wonder if the rain still remembers that night?" he asked. I smiled faintly, my eyes following the drops racing down the glass. "It remembers everything mercy touches. Rain forgets no kindness." Then, through the window, something caught my eye. In the street beyond the palace gates, a girl barefoot and soaked, holding a basket of bread close to her chest. And beside her, a man, cloaked, shivering, drenched, his face shadowed by the downpour. She hesitated, then slowly took off her scarf, thin, worn, trembling in her hands, and wrapped it around his shoulders. The world seemed to still. The thunder hushed, the air thickened, and even the rain seemed to bow. I felt my throat tighten as the memory of my own hands mirrored hers. That same gesture, that same mercy, reborn again in another heart. Kyle followed my gaze, his voice a whisper. "Another storm," he said. I nodded slowly, tears softening my smile. "No," I whispered. "Another beginning." As the rain deepened, I placed my hand over the old scarf that hung on the wall, feeling its quiet heartbeat through the glass. "Once," I said, "I shared warmth with a stranger. Today, I share mercy with the kingdom." The thunder rolled far away, fading like a lullaby. I closed my eyes, listening to the rhythm that had started it all. Because in the end, I whispered into the storm, kindness always finds its way home, even through the rain. If this story touched even a small corner of your heart, then let it live beyond this screen. Share it with someone who still believes kindness can change destinies. Tell me in the comments, what does mercy mean to you? Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us that compassion is never weakness. It's the crown only the brave can wear. Your voice keeps these tales alive. Stay, listen, and be part of the story.